A posto? Buonasera a tutti, grazie di essere venuti. Per noi è un grande orgoglio, un grande onore avere con noi Sir Robin Knox-Johnston. È stata una attenzione delicatissima che ha avuto la nostra Cristina Giussani, è da settembre che ci lavoriamo sopra e sarà una serata sicuramente indimenticabile. È una leggenda che noi abbiamo tutti studiato da piccoli, che noi abbiamo seguito da grandi e che questa sera è qui con noi. Buona serata a tutti.
Buonasera a tutti, anche da parte mia un ringraziamento, un benvenuto. Sono diversi anni che noi organizziamo degli incontri culturali, parliamo di vela, parliamo di mare. Questa sera è una serata sicuramente particolare perché non è da tutti, non è usuale avere un ospite d'eccezione di questo genere. E voglio fare un grandissimo ringraziamento a Cristina Giussani perché è soprattutto merito suo. È soprattutto merito suo e dietro questa serata c'è un grandissimo lavoro, per cui grazie da parte della compagnia della vela. Allora, Robin, immagino insomma che sappiate, conosciate tutti le sue milestones, la Golden Globe Race del 1968-69, diverse regate attraversate ecco, proprio parlando di Peter Blake, io credo che Robin possa avere come in Peter Blake l'unico termine di paragone tra i velisti dell'era moderna. Quindi benvenuto, adesso noi inizieremo a fargli delle domande, a vedere dei video, però prima voglio chiamare qui Paolo Romor, che è conoscete tutti, il vicepresidente del Consiglio Comunale di Venezia, che farà un saluto e credo che voglia rivolgere anche qualche parola a Robin.
Grazie Presidente. Grazie Presidente. Allora, innanzitutto un ringraziamento alla Compagnia della Vela e a Mare di Carta perché al culmine della stagione degli eventi culturali invernali ci regalano questo avvenimento bellissimo e prestigioso. Ecco, e quindi un ringraziamento da parte di tutta la città. E a Mr. Johnson vorrei consegnare sempre da parte della città dicendogli la grandezza di Venezia e della sua storia sono state fondate sulla navigazione, per cui è un grande onore proprio per questa città ospitarlo oggi e premiarlo, consegnargli questo piccolo riconoscimento che poi è solo simbolico, consegnarlo a un grande navigatore, grande velista come lui. Welcome in Venice.
Bene, iniziamo. Allora, rivolgeremo a Robin le domande in italiano, lui risponderà in inglese, quindi voi avrete, chi vorrà potrà utilizzare il sistema di traduzione. Allora, Robin, intanto grazie ancora di... Ah, scusami, cioè... No, Cristina, sì, assolutamente sì.
Scusate che ho interrotto Beppe, ma nell'emozione del momento siamo tutti molto emozionati. Volevo anch'io ovviamente ringraziare la Compagnia della Vela, senza la quale questi eventi non si organizzerebbero. Lo spazio bellissimo, chi già mi conosce mi sente ripetere sempre le stesse cose, sono un po' noiosa, ma questo è uno spazio che io ho nel cuore, che è fantastico, e la Compagnia della Vela da tanti anni ci permette di organizzare insieme queste bellissime serate. Detto questo, di Robin ha già detto molto Beppe, io e Beppe faremo delle domande a Robin, prima facciamo partire un primissimo veloce video e poi Beppe parti tu con le domande e ci alterneremo e poi alla fine c'è anche una sorpresa.
This really must be a tremendous moment for a man who is obviously loving every second of today's sail. Because there is the man of the day here at Falmouth. Any second now, the black rock beacon stretching out across the water from Tendennis Point will come into view just on the left of your picture. And the cannon is gone. The cannon has gone. The hooters, the horns, the salute. Day 312, about 25 past 3 on April the 22nd. And Robin Knox-Johnston and Sue Haley have sailed non-stop around the world.
Robin, credo che siano 55 anni che che ti vengono rivolte le domande che ti faremo questa sera, quindi perdonaci, però noi siamo interessati più che altro alle tue risposte. Allora, io vorrei innanzitutto chiederti questo. Ho letto che tu hai iniziato ad andare in barca sin da bambino, anche molto invitato, sollecitato dai tuoi genitori, che hanno avuto un ruolo molto importante in questo. Io vorrei chiederti non solo come è nata la tua passione per la vela, ma soprattutto che cosa poi ti ha spinto a intraprendere delle navigazioni oceaniche in solitario.
Grazie, Bevi. I didn't sail until I was 16 years old. Reason was the war. My father was away in the army. I didn't know him till I was 8 years old. And there wasn't enough money to buy a boat. At 17, I joined the Merchant Navy. And in those days, we were taught to sail. And I loved it. And all the time I could. I was on a ship where there were no crew. It was only officer cadets. We're a normal ship, but we were all trainees. And so we had extra boats to sail. And I spent, whenever I could, I was sailing. And we had 2 dinghies. And if one of them I thought was mine. And if anyone else took it out, I would hit them. Because that's my boat. And that's really, I suppose, my love for the sea started when I was 8 years old, and then I developed it by going professionally to sea and learning to sail.
E come è nata l'idea di iniziare a fare navigazioni in solitario in oceano?
Beppe, I didn't start intending to go solo. I started by building my boat in India, Suheli, and I sailed it home with a friend of my brother, and that took us about 18 months, where we went from India, Arabia, Africa, South Africa, and then non-stop South Africa to London. And I went back to sea. I was first officer on a big passenger ship. And I watched Francis Chichester come back, having sailed around the world with one stop in Australia. And I thought, is it possible to sail a boat twice as far? And I thought about my boat. I thought about my knowledge and experience. I thought, maybe. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized I've got to try. I've really got to try. I cannot wait till I'm 90 years old, look at myself in the bathroom mirror and say, I wish I'd done that. I've got to go and try it. And so it was solo, but then I knew the boat. I knew how to balance the boat by then. I knew how to make her sail by herself. And, well, close to the wind, not down the wind. But I felt I could manage, and I thought, I've got to do this. My biggest problem was trying to persuade people who might sponsor me that it was possible to go twice as far as any yacht had ever sailed before. I thought it might be possible. I didn't know for certain. I thought it might be, and I thought, I've got to try. But of course, no one believed me. So I got no sponsorship except 120 cans of beer, and from Cadbury's, the chocolate people, they gave me a voucher for £5. And that was it.
Grazie, grazie Robin. All'epoca del tuo record, del tuo giro del mondo in solitario senza scalo, le barche con le quali si potevano fare queste regate erano simili a quelle con cui si sarebbe potuto fare un giro del mondo in barca in famiglia. Oggi è molto diverso, le regate intorno al mondo sono dei bolidi, sono delle barche incredibili, mentre tuttora ci sono tante persone che decidono di fare il giro del mondo in barca in famiglia o comunque o anche in solitario, ma più per piacere. Allora io dico, oggi un ragazzo che si avvicina oggi alla vela, certo può partire in un modo o nell'altro, ma cosa suggerisci tu? Cioè una partenza magari con una crociera in famiglia, oppure magari fin da piccoli già cominciare a regatare sui dinghi e poi partire verso un mondo più competitivo?
You know, I get young people coming and asking me how they can get into the racing circuit. And there's really two things you have to say to them. One, how much experience do you have? And two, does anyone know you? Because the cost of these boats now, these Imoca 60s, is what, 7-8 million euros? You can't do it without sponsorship. Whereas I own my boat, well, mostly. I didn't tell the bank that I was taking part of their boat around the world when I went. But at least it was my boat. And it didn't cost anything like the money it costs today to go sailing in these races. And so it's very hard for young people to establish a reputation, and they must have a reputation to get the sponsorship. So really, they've got to start by A, being competitive in perhaps less expensive boats, build up experience, start any way you can, start on friends' boats, crewing for someone, it doesn't matter. You're learning all the time, building up experience. At some point, people will recognize you and say, I want to support this person. So you move up a scale. You might get into your national team, in which case you are getting recognized. That will help you. But you can't do it quite as easily. When we set off in the Golden Globe, really none of us had expensive boats. They were all pretty cheap boats. They were pretty standard boats, as you said. You could go to any marina and see boats like them. These days, these racing boats, they start at 60 feet and they just get bigger, but they're so expensive. You can't do it without sponsorship. So young people really have to build up, one, experience, and two, build up a reputation so they can go to a sponsor and say, I'm worth supporting if you back me, it'll be good for your business. And I don't see how they do it any other way unless their father is a millionaire, and a multi-millionaire at that.
Robin, oggi è abbastanza normale sapere che esiste una regata intorno al mondo in solitario, senza scalo. Però nel 1968 non era una cosa molto normale, molto usuale. Allora ti vorrei chiedere come è nata l'idea della Golden Globe Race e qual è stato la tua sensazione che ti ha portato a lasciare la Marina per partecipare alla regata.
Right, Beppe, I mean, to start with, I decided to try before the newspaper announced a race. The first I knew about the newspaper race was when it appeared in the paper and they said I was one of their contestants. They hadn't asked me, and I never signed an entry form. But I must have won because they gave me the prize at the end. But anyway, I was going to go anyway. I just felt, you know, we only have one life. And I always say to people, when you're thinking about your life, paint it with bright colors, because you're not coming back. So if you get an idea and you think, I really want to do that, go and do it. You don't want to wait till you're too old and say, I wish I'd done it. Too late. You must go and do it now. Now, I do realize if you're married, your wife might have other views. But maybe she's understanding enough to say, go and get it out of your system and then come back. And I'll keep a list of all the jobs you're going to do when you get back. But I think you just have to take opportunities. I saw it as an opportunity and I thought, I've just got to try that. And once I'd made my mind up, that was it, I was going. Nothing was going to stop me. I was definitely going. And from then on, it made life much easier, really, because most of the problems disappeared once I said, I'm doing it. The problems are there until you make the decision. Then the anti-problems disappear.
Adesso chiediamo a Roberto, ecco qua. Allora, alle nostre spalle si vede un filmato dove si vede Enza, la barca con cui Sir Robin e Sir Peter Blake hanno vinto, hanno battuto il record di velocità a vela, il record del giro del mondo di velocità a vela nel 94. Allora io volevo chiedere a Robin, che nella sua vita di velista ha conosciuto tantissimi navigatori che per noi sono navigatori da leggenda. Ha citato Chichester prima, però hai navigato tanto con Peter Blake, hai fatto anche una Whitbread, ma poi magari hai conosciuto qualche altro grande navigatore, ne parlavamo anche stamattina insieme. Allora vorrei chiederti chi è uno o due navigatori che hai incontrato che ti hanno veramente segnato emotivamente, affettivamente, o come esperienza o come stimolo per fare altre cose. Se magari ci racconti anche del record di Enza.
For 6 solid days. It's just unbelievable. Yeah, if I'm going to name a couple of sailors who I've known and liked, one would be the Frenchman Eric Tabley. I liked him a lot. Very good seaman. I raced him against him 3 times. Actually won each time, but I still have a huge respect for him. And I suppose someone I trained, another person I trained was Alex Thompson, who is still a very good friend. Other friends would be people like another Frenchman, Jean-Luc Van der Lied, great sailor, another great friend. Mich Desjoyer, French again, very good sailor. these days, because the French get sponsorship, an awful lot of the top sailors are French. But they have some very good sailors. I've got a lot of respect for them. And I enjoy their company. Who else? So many of them over the years. Mike Birch, Isabella Tissier, Francis Artaud,
35 days to get halfway around the world.
I mentioned John Luke,
has ever gone this fast.
Tito Namazou, Loic Perron, Mike Golding. It just goes on and on. And we're a small group of people, but we all know each other. And we're actually quite good friends. So it's great when I go to France, I'll meet some of them. And it's just lovely being together. And we talk about things. I'm just watching this race now, going around the world in these huge multi-hulls. And what a performance. 130 feet long. And the winner, Charles, he could have done it in 42 days. On his own. Now, 30 years ago, we went round in 75 days, and that was the record then. Look how things accelerated in 30 years. Almost half the time it takes to sail around the world, and they're doing it alone. And that's progress, and that's what sailing's about. These foil boats are just phenomenal. I wish I was about 50 years younger, because I'd certainly want to be sailing one.
Beh, allora hai in qualche modo anticipato un tema, una domanda che volevo porti dopo, ma l'anticipo. Vorrei sapere cosa ne pensi quindi della vela oceanica sui foil e chiedo anche quale potrebbe essere un nuovo record secondo te per il trofeo Jules Verne.
And then scoot up the coast of Argentina and cut them off.
I first saw foils, I think the first person I saw using them was Eric Tarbley, funny enough. And then we made an experimental boat for the America's Cup in Britain with foils, but they didn't get the balance right. They were still trying to make it work. And I think for a long time we were saying foils will be great, but it's going to be very difficult to balance them. Well, then I went sailing with Ben Ainsley on his foiler for the America's Cup. And I was amazed at how well balanced that was. It's all computer now. But boy, I mean, in about 5 seconds we've gone 0 to 42 knots. It's just unbelievable. And that was his first boat. Next ones are faster. And of course, as we know, the Italians were even faster in the last America's Cup because they beat them. I just feel this is very interesting. It's not something for everyone. All right, we look at the Moth dinghy class, they're now 40. And they're not hugely expensive. And the first time I saw one sailing towards me, all I could see was a hull above the sea.
It's perhaps the
and
first
I thought,
time
I'm
ever
hallucinating.
the world speed record
This is not
set by a
possible
boat
until it went
towing an
past.
anchor.
Whoa, look at that. And then I went out with Ben and I thought, they've got this now. And solo sailing has just picked it up. So the Vendée, this next race, is going to be won by a foiler. The last race is won by a foiler. And I think what we're going to see is just developments in foils until someone invents something even better. Whatever that is. But 30 years ago, we didn't think foils would exist. Look where we are.
Prima di fare la prossima domanda a Robin, volevo dire che se non sentite bene, il macchinario che ha infrarossi dovete tenerlo rivolto verso di noi, perché è una questione di radio, ok?
In 74 days, 22 hours and 17 minutes, the biggest
So many
racing cat in the
navigations
world, average
alone
27
or
kilometers an hour,
in team.
right around the globe.
Scusate, sono partita in inglese, scusate. Sorry. Scusami Manuela. Tra tutte le tue numerosissime navigazioni in solitario o in equipaggio, avrei voglia di chiederti un momento magico o una serie di momenti magici, un momento di paura se un uomo come te può avere paura in mare, perché forse no, e anche rispetto al passato e a oggi come sono un po' cambiate queste emozioni, perché quando hai fatto il giro del mondo nel 68-69 fin quasi all'inizio hai perso anche la radio, per cui non c'era modo di comunicare. Oggi noi, seguendo le regate intorno al mondo, sappiamo in ogni momento dove sono, abbiamo il tracking, i video, i Facebook, cioè un continuo, no? Siamo sempre in contatto con i navigatori, noi che lo facciamo per divertimento, a maggior ragione le famiglie, mentre in altri tempi le famiglie non sapevano nulla. Allora ti chiedo così, due emozioni, un momento bellissimo, un momento di paura e anche l'emozione rispetto ai contatti con chi si lascia.
Start whenever you like. Round the main capes to port.
Look, I think
no
the
motors,
person
no
who says
assistance,
they're never
and no
frightened
stopping.
at sea
And the yacht, no
is
restrictions.
inhuman
Anything
or
goes.
a bloody liar. Because of course there are times when you're frightened at sea. And you're saying, what am I doing here? Why did I start this? Too late. I'm here. I've got to deal with it. But think about, a lot of you probably sail, think about it. The first time you have a gale, bad weather, it's frightening. The 50th time, oh no, not again. Because you've got 50 more experiences.
That's our 6th day.
And fear is largely the unknown.
Average speed of
So the more
21.55
experience you
knots
have, the
over the
less
last
frightened you're
24
likely to
hours.
be.
This means that
But
we've
it
now
doesn't mean there
averaged
isn't a new experience or
19.05
something
knots.
happens that frightens you.
19.05
It's out there.
knots for
And
6
all you've got to do is say,
solid
I haven't got
days.
time to
Just
be frightened. I've
unbelievable.
got to deal with the problem. And it's probably the only thing you can do.
Yet even now, in
Sorry, there
weather
was
to
another
make
part
most
of that
yachties head
question.
for home, this boat's doing close to the suburban speed limit.
Magic moments. Thank you so much. Well translated. That's very. Do you know, I think the lovely thing about sailing is there's lots of magic moments. There was a magic moment when I discovered after 4.5 months with no communication, and I met a ship, and all I had was a signal lamp, and I called it up and said, please report me to Lloyd's. Next day, nothing on the radio.
Winds up to 45 knots.
Then a week later, I ran into a French merchant ship, and I called him up and asked him to report me to Lloyd's because I was missing. And he came back and said, yes, you're missing. What? Strange thing to say. And then I realized, I said, where's Bernard Matessier? He said, he's in the Indian Ocean. I said, I don't believe that.
Tomorrow with that will pass New Zealand the halfway point.
The French are like trying to make me go slow. Of course, it's true.
No sailing boat has ever
And then I
gone this
realized,
fast in all of
wait a
history.
minute.
It's quite incredible progress.
We are going to be the first. And that was a magic moment. And being of northern
Down here, every chore
ancestry,
is done in a fridge with
I
a
got
hose
out a
on.
bottle of whiskey,
The sea temperature, an
and I
unsurvivable
tipped half
1
over the
to 4
boat,
degrees above freezing.
and I drank the other
And
half
the ice
to celebrate.
is yet to come.
But that was a magic moment. Yes, not for the reason you think. But you know, there's so many times when you're sailing, for instance, if you're in the trade winds, the Élysée as the French call them, and you've got a lovely day, the wind is about 16, 20 knots, the sun's shining, the sea is blue, white fluffy clouds, the boat sailing beautifully, and you say, why would I want to be anywhere else? Or you go up to the ice in Greenland, I go there at the Arctic a lot, and you're working your way through the ice and saying, you know, this is living. This is being alive. Just getting your boat through that ice. You can't go fast. Ice is floating rock. But just working through and the satisfaction it gives you, say, yes, this is what I do this for. Or on Enza, going down waves. In those days, I'm talking 30 years ago, we get up to 30 knots. And you're going so fast, you overtake the wave in front and the next wave, and you're surfing at this speed until you run out of speed and hit the next one. But while you're surfing at those speeds, you're saying, I've never experienced anything like this. This is fantastic. How else do you get a pleasure like this of sailing this great big catamaran at these incredible speeds down the front of these waves, and just watching the speedo going up and up and up and up and up, and saying, how far can I get it? I want to be faster than the other crew, because you're always competing. But it was just phenomenal. I mean, so there's all these things. There's little things as well. You can sit in an anchorage in Scotland quietly in the evening with your family, glass of wine in your hand, nice evening. For once in Scotland, it's not raining. And you're just saying, why would I want to be anywhere else? This is fantastic. I'm sitting. There's no one else here. I'm looking at these mountains, sitting quiet. Why would I change? Got my family with me. What more do I want in life? So I think there's so many magic moments, and they all, for me, they all come from sailing.
Ho letto che sei superstizioso e che, ad esempio, non ami navigare di venerdì 13. Questo è un lato molto italiano, Robin, della tua persona.
Oh, Beppe, I'm not in the least superstitious. I won't sail on Friday the 13th. I don't know why. I don't know. It's just we have this superstition, don't we? And it's not just Italian. I think it's shared throughout Europe. Yes, there are superstitions. There's funny ones. For instance, in Britain, fishermen will never use a certain type of match, swan vestas. They consider it unlucky. Green is unlucky as a color. And you get them particularly with fishermen. But there are all these funny superstitions. You say, yeah, I don't believe in them. But then at the back of your mind you say, yeah, maybe I better be careful.
Bene, allora, io sono velista, amante del mare, ma prima di tutto in questo momento, in questo luogo, libraia. E allora ti faccio una domanda che faccio spesso agli autori che incontriamo, soprattutto ai navigatori che poi scrivono. E abbiamo sempre avuto tutti i tuoi libri in libreria e devo dire li ho sempre letti con grande piacere. E vorrei chiederti com'è che a un certo punto, dopo una grande esperienza, uno decide di scrivere. Ho capito che il primo libro faceva parte forse anche del giro del mondo in solitario e degli accordi magari presi con lo sponsor o col giornale che aveva sponsorizzato la regata, però in generale sicuramente quando tu fai un'esperienza di un certo tipo, ma anche successivamente la tua autobiografia per esempio è molto recente, ecco, cos'è che spinge una persona come te con delle esperienze del genere a scrivere? Una voglia di trasmettere agli altri, una voglia di avere un ricordo per sé? Cosa ti ha spinto a scrivere? Hai scritto più di un libro.
Well, the first book, you see, I couldn't get any sponsorship, but I needed to buy food for 10.5 months. And I signed a contract for a book, which I had to write within 60 days when I finished. Now, it was a very clever contract, which I didn't invent. A little bit of money to start with, just enough to buy food. Then when I passed Africa, a little bit more money. When I passed Australia, a little bit more money. When I passed South America, a little bit more money. When I finished, some more money. So the publisher and the newspaper thought it's not very much money to start with. If he doesn't do it, it doesn't cost us much. So I had a book publisher in America and London, and a magazine in America and a newspaper in London, all on the same terms. So I got enough money to buy food to start, and then I sailed. And when I came home, I had enough money to pay the bank back and a little bit over. Not huge. We didn't have a lot of money in those days, but enough. And so I then, when I got back, I thought, I'm alive. I'm going to nightclubs. I'm having a great time. And then the publisher said, Robin, you know the contract? Yep. It said 60 days. Yep. You've got 40 left. Oh. Yeah, I better start writing. So that's how the first book came about. But the other answer to your question, actually, I quite enjoyed writing it. And I enjoyed putting the words together. And so I then started writing more, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed particularly English is an interesting language because we've got more than 1 million words, so we can play with our language more than most. And it's great fun putting a sentence together using different words to create the same meaning. And then you write it and say, leave that now. Tomorrow I'll read it again. Oh, that was terrible. I must change everything. And so you go on until you say, well, I think it's ready for the publisher. And then the publisher says, well, it's not bad. You can make it better. Oh, okay, so we start again. And so it goes on till eventually you have a book. But at that point, you say, thank goodness for that. I can relax. And then a little bit later, you think, maybe I'll write another one. Because you've forgotten all the trouble you had with the previous one. Poor memory.
Nel 2015 l'Huffington Post ti ha definito come uno degli uomini più influenti del Regno Unito. Allora ti voglio chiedere di spiegarci come è possibile che a noi che come uomini influenti abbiamo degli influencer da social network, com'è possibile invece che dei navigatori in Inghilterra possono essere delle persone così importanti, a cui ad esempio viene conferita un'onorificenza come quella che tu hai avuto di Sir, che condividi con persone come Peter Blake oppure Ben Ainsley. In Italia questo può succedere al massimo se si vince la Coppa del Mondo di calcio.
It's not quite the same, actually. By 2015, I was fairly quiet. I was busy with Clipper Race. But in the 90s, I became president of the Sail Training Association, which is youth development, really. And we also ran the tall ships races, which Amerigo Vespucci used to come to. A lot of Italian boats came. It was international. And that probably was one of the most interesting things I did, because we take these young people, girls and boys, put them on our 2 schooners, 40 at a time, for 2 weeks, and you watch them change. You'd watch them grow in confidence. You know, they'd suddenly feel, I'm not useless, I can do this. I mean, the first thing we do is send them up the coast. Now that's frightening. First time you do it, it's frightening. And of course they're frightened, but you make them do it. And when they come down, you don't say much, you just walk past and say, well done. For many of them, that's the first time anyone in their lives has said, well done. And suddenly they say, hey, yes, I did that. And now you're starting to turn them around. You're starting to make them understand that they can do more than they thought. At the end of 2 weeks, they're up at the mast, dancing and frightening me. But I've got them tied on. And that was so stimulating. You know, the fun, the satisfaction it gave me watching the change in people, which was partly the reason for setting up the Clipper Race. Because I saw how it changes people's lives. So, for instance, in the Clipper Race, an 18-year-old was set off, and a year later, that person is 25 years old. They've matured so much. But a 60-year-old is coming back saying, I've done something special with my life. I have greater confidence now. I will take on bigger challenges. And it's nothing clever I do. I just make it possible. It's being at sea on a boat and the discipline forced on you by nature on a boat, forced on you by having to live together and work together in a team. You know, who's going to do the cooking today? It's your turn. Well, I don't do it. You do here. You have to share. Teaches everyone lessons for life. And you see the change in them, and it's so satisfying. But particularly with the young ones, you say, I've changed that person. We've done it with Clipper. We took 10 youngsters from Soweto in South Africa, you know, a township. It was terrible. And we took them one at a time on the race. The end of it, every one of them had changed. One girl decided she was going to get herself to university, studied, went to university, took a law degree. She's now working for the United Nations in New York. And yet she was nothing in Soweto. The boys were the same. And we just saw the change in these people. And you turn around and say, actually, those lives are now totally different for something we made possible. Now that is something to be very proud of, in my view. And I'm probably most proud of that in my life.
Allora, hai anticipato qualcosa della mia prossima domanda, che era sulla Clipper Race. Allora, volevo chiederti come è nata l'idea della Clipper Race Around the World, mentre ce lo racconti, chiedo a Roberto se fa partire il terzo video, che secondo me ci racconta qualcosa di quello che poi ci racconterai. Il video
Was taken up in the Arctic, Greenland, and I was trying to get through the ice to go mountaineering, but as you will see, I couldn't get through the ice. So, anyway, the Clipper Race actually came about with a guy you'll see here, Sir Chris Bonington, probably Britain's top mountaineer, and I used to go mountaineering with him, and we were going up again to go mountaineering, but we'd done it before, and he was telling me how much it cost to climb Mount Everest. And I forget how much, it was a lot of money. And I thought, what is the equivalent in sailing? I thought, circumnavigation. How many people are out there who don't have the confidence to do it on their own or with other people, or have a boat and are frightened, who would love to achieve a circumnavigation? So I did some calculations on a piece of paper, quick ones, and how much would it cost me to ride a boat, a skipper, training, food, clothing, all the ports and the costs. And it came out about half the cost of climbing Mount Everest. So two of us put an advert in the paper and we got 8,000 answers. When you get that response, you better do it, because if you don't do it now, someone else will, and it's our idea. So we set up Clipper, and we built 8 boats, we filled them, and we started our first race in 1996. And we're now doing our 14th race around the world with 11 boats instead of 8, and far more people. And I think we've taken, after this race, there'll be nearly 7,000 people would have crossed an ocean with us at some stage or another. But 40% of those people have never been on a boat before. And they come to us and saying, I'd like to do this, but how will I be safe? I said, you'll be safe because you're doing 4 weeks hard training. If you're not good enough, I won't let you go. But if I can make you good enough, I will let you go. Now that's your security. And I don't get many people dropping out because normally people want to do it. When they want to do it, they're enthusiastic, so they learn. And that's much easier to teach people like that. So it seems to work pretty well, actually, but that's how Clipper started. And here I am 27 years later, still doing it. Not as involved as I was. I've stepped back a little bit, but I should be flying out to China soon to see the boats go through China and check they can still tie their knots properly, make sure they're behaving themselves. In the early days, it was much more amusing. I mean, we'd have to get some of the crew out of prison. Others would, one decided he would fight an ex-French foreign legionnaire. He lost. and we had to patch him up. I mean, we had some amazing characters and very funny stories, but I won't bore you with them now.
Allora, noi questa sera abbiamo il piacere di avere non solo Robin qui, ma abbiamo il piacere di avere anche Alex Carozzo, che è socio onorario della Compagnia della Vela, è socio che prego di venire. Allora, per chi non lo sapesse, ma sono pochi senz'altro, Alex ha partecipato con Robin, Alex no, siedi qui, ha partecipato con Robin alla Golden Globe Race del 1968-69, quindi mi fa molto piacere aver invitato dopo Robin anche Alex, perché insomma credo che fosse la cosa più giusta e più bella che voi vi incontraste qui questa sera.
Anche perché vi siete incontrati recentemente, mi risulta anche, giusto? Vi siete incontrati recentemente con Robin? 2018? Un po' dopo il 68.
Hello? Dunque, era molti anni che io non vedevo Sir Robin e poi c'è stata una data, a very important date, quando abbiamo rifatto la partenza del primo giro del mondo. Quindi c'è stata questa emozione di rinnovare una visione di barche che partono per fare il giro del mondo. Adesso è diventata una cosa abbastanza, non dico normale, ma si può fare. Ma parliamo di 30-40 anni fa, era ancora una data mitica, era un'impresa. Mentre lui stava, while you were talking before, I was thinking to you and your father. Quando ha parlato prima, dice poi fare il giro del mondo. Cosa vuol dire fare il giro del mondo? Vuol dire lui e suo padre che dicono, certo, dice, ormai l'unica cosa, l'ultima cosa da fare è fare il giro del mondo senza scalo. E lui dice, sì, ma dice, ci vuole una barca un po' più grossa del Swahili, però non hanno soldi, allora vanno in cerca di una barca più grossa del Swahili. E poi in cucina loro due parlano e dice, sì, dice, se non lo facciamo noi lo fanno i francesi, poi ci romperanno le balle finché campiamo, dice, no, dice, è roba nostra, dobbiamo farlo noi. E lui sa che vanno in cerca di una barca più grande ma non ce la fanno, e quindi in cucina loro sono due che parlano e dice, allora, ok, Swahili.
I can remember, Alex, learning that you had a 60-foot boat and thinking, well, he's going to win the race. He's got the biggest boat. It'll be the fastest. And of course, you were very unlucky because you became ill. But there were only 9 of us even started the idea. Think about it. Most people said you're mad. But 9 of us thought, no, maybe it's possible. And you and I are 2 of them. You had bad luck. But if you hadn't been ill, You might have got round first.
Ha detto che se non ti fossi ammalato saresti forse tu arrivato primo.
Non ho capito.
Avevi molte chance di arrivare prima.
Well, sì, avevo delle chance che mi ero costruito un po' veloci, perché io nel 68 sono partito a fare la regata all'Ostar nel 68 con un catamarano che avevo fatto in un anno e mezzo, praticamente ho fatto un catamarano di 16 metri, che era la barca più veloce e più sicura in tutta Europa. Non l'ho detto io, l'ho detto altra gente. E quindi quando stavo tornando a casa dall'Ostar, avevo perduto di notte, ho incrociato una balena, ho perduto la deriva di dritta e il timone di sinistra. Quindi ho detto torno a casa, torno a Plymouth. E intanto che tornavo a Plymouth è venuto fuori questa notizia che c'era il Giro del Mondo, il primo del Giro del Mondo senza scalo. Quindi un'impresa da meditare molto a lungo. Non era una cosa dove uno si cacciava dentro così. E infatti lui si caccia dentro, ma lui è un uomo che viene dalla marina mercantile. You are in the Merchant Navy. I was in the Merchant Navy. E io anche ero nella marina mercantile e quindi alle spalle avevamo, se non altro, una consapevolezza di quello che voleva dire star per mare anche per lungo tempo e di aver visto cosa il mare poteva fare. E siccome fare il giro del mondo comportava andare a sud, e quindi andare a sud comportava una visione molto solida di quello che poteva succedere, e cioè onde di 10-12 metri, come lui ha visto, come io ho visto nel Nord Pacifico, e quindi un mare da guardare da molto lontano se non eri preparato. E quindi quando lui decide poi di fare il giro del mondo, lui aveva già alle spalle un viaggio dall'India, ha portato a casa, la barca è stata costruita in India, il Swahili, quindi lui era andato dall'India a casa e poi dice, o prima o dopo qualcuno lo farà. Ok, dice, andiamo. Fine della chiacchierata. Vi ringrazio molto di essere venuti, vi ringrazio molto per lui, perché lui si merita tutto questo pubblico più un altri 10 o 20 pubblici.
Aspetta Alex, aspetta un attimo perché vorrei fare una domanda a entrambi. Allora, io quando ho letto della Golden Globe Race ho avuto la sensazione di un'impresa pari alle grandi spedizioni in Antartide, ai pionieri dell'aviazione. Naturalmente il mondo, non solo il mondo è diverso grazie alla tecnologia, ma il mondo corre, per cui le regate di 5 anni fa sono tutt'altra cosa rispetto alle regate che si fanno adesso, al tipo di navigazione che c'è adesso. Ecco, io voglio chiedere a entrambi se in tutto questo c'è ancora spazio per una visione romantica della vela, della navigazione e della regata.
That's a good question. I think it's harder because if you think in 69 when I got back, that was the first non-stop. It's now 200 people who've done it since then. So all they can do really is go faster. Now, I'm not denigrating that. I mean, the speeds are getting better and better, more and more exciting. And I think it's great, it's wonderful. But it's not quite the same as having things you can be first at. And that's getting harder and harder. So I think for young people these days, it's really quite hard. What is there to do? Well, all I can say to you young people, if you think of it, don't tell me, because I'll probably try and beat you. But I think that, I mean, there's romance in cruising. If you go up to the Arctic, it's fabulous up there, it really is. No people, well, very few. Wonderful scenery, and no one to bother you. The government doesn't know where you are. The tax inspector can't find you. It's absolutely perfect up there. What do you think?
Cosa pensi oggi? Esistono ancora navigazioni romantiche come quelle che avete fatto voi in passato, con queste, con queste corse, con i bolidi che si fanno adesso?
Il romanticismo, ci sono due tipi. Il romanticismo da due palanche, un po' giornalistico se vogliamo, oppure scritto da gente che scrive per sentito dire di certe cose, e invece poi ci sono le persone che pensano ancora che il mare è una cosa grande, è una cosa durissima e delicata, dove devi andarci piano e quando torni sarai un uomo ricco, per una serie di ragioni. Tant'è vero che io sono qui ancora a parlarne da uomo emozionato con un altro uomo che è molto meno emozionato di me, che però ha fatto delle cose che, come il grande cinema racconta, lui ha visto delle cose che voi umani non avete mai visto.
E devo dire anche vi ringrazio tantissimo, quindi non so quante domande riusciremo. Io faccio la valletta, scendo col microfono. Ecco.
Una domanda per entrambi, one question for both. Quali sono i vostri prossimi piani velici, i vostri prossimi programmi a vela?
Grazie per la domanda. La domanda è molto interessante. Direi che il Carozzo ormai si è messo a riposo, ha navigato parecchio, gli ultimi anni li ho fatti vogando sul Garda col kayak. Adesso il Carozzo si è messo, prima di diventare una cosa, cioè di dare delle prove deboli, chiamiamole così, è meglio che lui si metta a riposo. Qui abbiamo un campione invece che ancora è in gambissima, si vede e si sente, e quindi io auguro a lui altri 30 o 40 anni di vita. E io direi che ho fatto il mio, sono abbastanza contento, ho avuto una moglie che ha avuto le balle di aspettarmi sempre senza scappare, e quindi posso dire di aver fatto qualcosina, ho scritto un paio di libri e direi che sono in pace.
You know, it's, I think a lot of us are very curious people. And it's always thinking, what's round the corner? I've gone this far, let's see what's over this hill. So I'll go to the top of the hill and I'll look. And when you get to the top of the hill, you say, I'll just go to the next one and look. There's always new things to look at, new things to see. So in answer to your question, in April, I shall sail around Ireland. So I've never done it before. My ancestry is Northern Irish. I've still got relatives there. But I shall start in the south and I shall slowly work my way around, and I'm going with friends. So we're going to have a great time. Or as I put it to someone, there's two types of beer in Ireland. There's Murphy's in the south and Guinness in the north. So I shall sail from Murphy's to Guinness, and I shall take 2 months to do it.
È una curiosità. Che cosa o chi tiene compagnia un uomo che sta così tanto tempo da solo in mezzo al mare?
Molto interessante. No.
I think people don't realize how busy you are. You know, when we were doing this, there were no satellites. Radio was not particularly good. You had a single sideband set, which sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. You had to get through on a frequency. That was tricky. And I was a communications officer in the Navy, so I knew how to do it, and I knew how difficult it was. But by the time you've been taking your sights with a sextant, probably 3 a day minimum, there's probably an hour's work. There's the work of keeping the boat, the sails in one piece. You're stitching, you're repairing things. You've got to cook for yourself. You need rest. In my case, I'm very organized about keeping a logbook. It's precise, and I keep it up very regularly. And I always criticize people who don't, because I say you need to keep a logbook. And I used to keep a diary because I knew I had to write a book. So I thought, well, I better try and remember what happened. So I was keeping a diary, which I've got at home. But actually, you're more busy. And then off Australia, where my rudimentary self-steering failed, I was doing a lot of steering, sometimes up to 16 hours a day. I just sit there steering. And I took to learning poetry. English language is rich with poetry. And I just sit there and recite poetry to myself. And I'd get it wrong, and I'd make myself do it again and do it again and do it again until it was stuck in my mind. And the reason I did it, I was 29 years old, and I thought, I can't afford to come home mad. Therefore, I need to keep my mind active. And it struck me, forcing my memory to do some work wasn't a bad idea. Now you're going to say, what poems did you learn? I can't remember.
Allora, grazie della vostra presenza e della vostra esperienza. Volevo fare una domanda che in parte Robin ha già risposto poco fa. Allora, in tutte le regate, anche quelle zonali qua, locali o mondiali, tipo domani che sta arrivando il primo della Global Solo Challenger, c'è un problema o ci sono problemi tecnici, nel senso che sono barche portate all'esasperazione con la tecnologia, con i materiali, però si rompono le sartie, salta l'albero, si rompono le vele, salta la radio, qualcosa c'è sempre che si guasta. L'unica cosa che non si guasta è lo skipper? O c'è il pericolo che anche lo skipper, sottoposto a sollecitazioni prolungate, abbia qualche anomalia?
Now, you don't expect me to sit here and criticize my fellow skippers, do you? Because I won't. Of course we make mistakes. And if you're like me, you'll say you're doing a day race, and I used to a lot of it. At the end of the day, you'd think, why did I go wrong? What can I do better next time? And I'd sit there and worry about it until I thought, I know what I did wrong. Tomorrow I will be better. And I'd ask my crew. I'd say, you know, anything we've learned today, guys? You know, you're doing this well, you're doing this well. We can be faster at this. You know, we're a team. We're racing as a team. We've got to be like that when things happen. When I was in the Admiral's Cup team twice for Britain, and we were damn good, but then we trained from February. We were out every weekend practicing. And by the time the season started, we were really good. We were very efficient. And, you know, we'd round a mark, say a windward mark, spinnaker was up as we turned. We didn't wait 2 or 3 lengths. I was watching the Volvo boats and I thought, put it up, put it up. Why are you spending all that time? You haven't put your spinnaker up. You're not professionals. You're just paid. You know, come on. And I think in the days of the Admiral's Cup when I was doing it, none of us were paid. And my goodness, we went for it. We were very, very competitive. And yet at the same time, with 16 nations competing, there was a wonderful atmosphere amongst the sailors before the professionals came. Because you might be Italian, he might be German, he might be Australian. Australians are particularly, you know, we and the British and the Australians have a crump. We do it in cricket, rugby, sailing, and we're always competing. But in the evening, you'll drink a beer together and enjoy it. And that, I think, was when sailing was fun. The boats were pretty equal. There was everything to race for. We're all representing our countries, but we're all amateurs. And we're racing like hell to win. But at the same time, we were having fun doing it. And I'm glad to see they might just be bringing that series back, because the pre-professional days were much more fun for most of us who were amateur sailors.
Posso chiedere com'è stato navigare con Peter Blake e com'era Peter Blake in generale?
Peter was one of my best friends, actually. He first sailed with me 1971 Cape Rio race, which we won. Well, we came in first. And then we kept in touch. He married a girl in England, Pippa. And then we did the Whitbread. And he was my lieutenant, and I couldn't have asked for a better man. But by this time we were strong friends, and I admired him both as a very good seaman and a very good organizer. He was both. Peter wouldn't have claimed he was an Olympic sailor, but he was a good sailor. And it's different sort of sailing we do, oceanic sailing. And then he went off and did the Whitbread on his own, very successfully. And partly down to inspiring leadership, partly down to his organization. I think probably those 2 things as much as anything, but he's a good sailor. And then we were both on the Whitbread committee, and I remember us coming away from a meeting, we'd heard the French government had produced a new trophy, the Jules Verne Trophy, the first boats to go around the world in under 80 days. And we discussed it, and we said, well, I was looking for a sponsor, he was looking for a sponsor. Neither of us was getting anywhere. We said, why don't we team up? So we did. And within 6 weeks, we had a sponsor. And we found the boat we wanted, Mike Birch's Tagua, which was lying in America, pretty sorry. We didn't tell anyone what we were doing, because if we'd said what we were doing, they'd have put the price of the boat up. So I slipped over there quietly to check it. And of course ran into an American friend. What are you doing here, Robin? Oh, nothing. Just spending a holiday. And we bought the boat quite cheaply, and then we modified it. And we did the Jules Verne. Now, the first time, we're up against a very good Frenchman called Bruno Perron. And we were just sitting behind him, putting the pressure on. By 100, 150 miles. At those speeds, 8 hours. We just sat there. And every day was breaking something, and we weren't. And then, of course, we hit something, so we had to pull out. And Bruno did it in just under 80 days. Great effort. And then we thought, well, that's it. And then the sponsor said, listen, we got some great publicity. Would you guys go again? We just said, is the Pope a Catholic? Of course we'll go again. So we altered the boat and we went again. And we did it in just under 75 days. And we're still the only non-French team to have ever won the Jules Verne Trophy. And if I was a bit younger, I'd want another go, especially nowadays with foils. Oh boy, I'd love to do that.
Io sono qua, credo che facciamo l'ultima domanda, giusto? Poi ancora un paio di domande. Una domanda.
Va bene. Innanzitutto buonasera a tutti. Una domanda per Mr. Johnson. Cosa ha pensato quando ha saputo del ritiro di Bernard Montessier? Qual è stata la sua emozione o che cos'altro ha avuto dentro di sé come...
I didn't really know about it until I finished. Off New Zealand, I met some fishermen and a journalist. They told me he was about 4.5 weeks behind me. I thought, I can beat him. I've got the lead. I've got enough time to beat him. But then I had no news for 5 months. So I didn't know where he was or anything. And after I'd finished, as I was getting close, they told me he'd pulled out of the race. I thought, oh, interesting. Why? And at that time, we didn't know why. We found out later. He just decided, I don't want the fuss. I'm much more happy on my own at sea. And people said to me, well, he went mad, didn't he? I said, no, he didn't. He didn't go mad at all. I felt the same. I didn't want to finish. I was very comfortable on my own by then. I'd become a creature of the sea. As long as my food lasts, I probably had a month's worth left. I'm just happy to go on sailing. And I think Bernard had the same feeling. But we used to write to each other. About every year we'd write letters to each other. And we only met the once actually in Paris. But I had great respect for him. And we used to write very friendly, amicable letters to each other about once a year to be, I suppose. Very good sailor. But if you looked at those of us who set out, I think he and I were the best prepared. Only it wasn't realized at the time because no one noticed a merchant navy sailor and they didn't look at what I'd already done. And for me, navigation's my job. Seamanship's my job. You're just asking me to add sailing to it. And I built my boat and sailed it 20,000 miles and people didn't click to how experienced I was. And that was their mistake. The Sunday Times paper didn't. It just said he's not determined enough, he won't do it. That was a silly thing to say, because in the end they had to admit I'd won. What do they do now? They have to give me the prize.
Alex voleva ancora raccontarci qualcosa della partenza del 68, giusto Alex?
Sì, grazie. Nel 68 io ho costruito appunto un catamarano col quale ho fatto l'Ostar, mi ritiro e c'è questa grande notizia del giro del mondo senza scalo. E quindi io nel giro di 20 giorni disegno una barca lunga 20 metri e cominciamo a costruirla al Medina Yacht Club a Cowes, in Inghilterra, e cominciamo a costruire questa barca sapendo che abbiamo circa 2 mesi e mezzo di tempo. La partenza era il 1° ottobre, e quindi fare questa barca voleva dire non sbagliare niente, e io per non sbagliare ho fatto una carena di 20 metri a spigolo per la velocità di costruzione, e poi ho passato tutta l'attrezzatura velica del San Giorgio, cioè ho passato tutto il piano velico del San Giorgio, che era una barca di un catamaran di 16 metri, l'ho passata su un monoscafo di 20. Il primo giorno che siamo usciti con i costruttori, mi ricordo, io ero anche abbastanza contento perché siamo riusciti a fare la barca in tempo, e la barca, tutti con la bocca aperta, la barca che camminava da sola. Quindi la barca era venuta molto bene, e in quel periodo, incidentalmente, un particolare interessante della nostra partecipazione comune, perché partire per questi viaggi, allora erano dei viaggi, era una regata ma era anche un grande viaggio, voleva dire essere sotto stress non solo da un punto di vista come dire economico, ma anche sotto un punto di vista come dire sentimentale. E infatti abbiamo avuto c'è stata una storia molto triste quando Donald Crowe-Hurst, è un inglese che aveva dei lavoretti e che poi ha deciso anche lui di partecipare a questa grandissima regata. Donald Crowe-Hurst, me lo ricordo, per stringere, ha fatto una bruttissima fine. Io me lo ricordo benissimo. A Cowes sono andato a visitare il suo trimarano, che aveva un trimarano di 9-10 metri, è cascato in acqua davanti a me sugli scalini per montare in dinghy. Siamo andati a bordo e mentre salivo a bordo della sua barca è caduta in acqua un'altra volta. Quindi lui era, da un punto di vista psicofisico, era già andato molto lontano. Ha avuto la sfortuna di pensare una cosa molto molto più grande di lui, perché si era indebitato e quindi ha detto prenderò il premio di 10.000 sterline, cioè faccio il giro del mondo e prendo su dei soldi. Questo è stato una delle cose che possono succedere appunto quando si gioca con questo tipo di gioco molto serio.
Grazie Alex. Allora, io faccio la chiusura della libraia, poi passo la chiusura al Presidente e al Vicepresidente. Allora, intanto 2 cose tecniche. Mi raccomando di riportare correttamente le cuffiette. Non portatevi a casa le cuffiette, lasciatele qua. Ringrazio tantissimo Robin, che è una persona fantastica. Ringrazio Alex, che è il nostro... Vi ricordo che da libraia con la mia socia che è là abbiamo portato un po' di libri. Robin è super paziente e ha voglia di fare le dediche, per cui se avete voglia poi lo portiamo lì vicino ai libri a fargli fare le dediche. Vi ringrazio tutti tantissimo. Non so a chi passo la parola, se a Beppe o a Lamberto.
Allora, anch'io ringrazio tutti, ringrazio naturalmente Robin e Alex di averci onorato con la loro presenza. E adesso Lamberto Deò, che è il vicepresidente della Compagnia della Vela, vi consegnerà il libro del centenario, il libro della Compagnia della Vela, che è stato fatto per il centenario del 2011, e la medaglia, sempre della Compagnia della Vela. Entrambe sono due opere del nostro inossidabile Corrado Scrascia. La medaglia raffigura un incrocio tra il Moro di Venezia, in occasione dell'America's Cup, che ha fatto l'America's Cup del 1992, con il 12 metri stazza internazionale Dux, naturalmente un incrocio immaginario, e dall'altra parte invece c'è il simbolo, il distintivo, ecco, della Compagnia della Vela. Bene, vi ringrazio moltissimo, passo la parola a Lamberto e voglio ringraziare sin d'ora il Catering San Marco, che ha offerto il buffet, che San Marco Ristorazione, che ha offerto il buffet che tra poco ci aspetta, per cui Lamberto, a te.
Posso dire solo una cosa velocissima? Voglio ricordare che Robin, alla fine della regata, ha donato il premio alla moglie di Donald Croest, e questo è molto importante. E poi nel nostro piccolo io voglio ringraziare la nostra fantastica traduttrice. Grazie.
Bene, grazie a tutti di questa partecipazione. Credo che sia stata una serata molto importante per noi. Sicuramente per la Compagnia della Vela sarà una serata indimenticabile. Vi aspettiamo tutti a prendere un bicchiere assieme ai nostri ospiti e vi ringrazio ancora. Grazie infinite.